So welcome back. We are here today filming the second quarter or first half of the year 2024 wrap-up Russell recap. And we're going to be taking a deep dive into what has been going on in the Sarasota and Manatee County real estate market. And as I always say at the beginning of these videos, this is meant to be a deep dive with a lot of statistical information and analysis. And if you enjoy me talking, if you enjoy numbers and charts and graphs, you're going to love this. If you don't like those things, this may not be the video for you. With that being said, we have had a stellar start to 2024. We have over $40 million of closed and pending sales so far this year, and we have been able to help over 20 families either buy or sell their residential family homes in Sarasota and Manatee County, which is awesome. And another thing I'd like to say is that we're grateful for that, and we would love if you are watching these videos, if it's your first time or you've been watching a lot of them, if you could subscribe to our channel and then also comment if you have any questions or anything, good or bad to say about the video. It just helps us to get the interaction, helps us to continue to reach out and give you a more broad message. So with all that being said, it seems that every time I do this, I'm thinking, gosh, it's so good that I'm getting into the numbers because people really need to know what's going on in the market. And if you look going all the way back to about 2019, we really haven't had a quarter where life has been quote unquote normal. We had COVID, we had the very unexpected surge after that, we've had things slowing down, and now I'm filming this in late July 2024, we've had crazy turns in American politics. It feels like everything is in flux. We're not quite sure what's going on in the market because we're getting data and information from all these different points and sources. And so today, what I'm going to try to do is distill everything down, give you my perspective, my opinion on what's going on and where we might be headed for the back half of the year. So I have a bunch of slides that I want to show you today, and let's just get right into the numbers and let's see what they tell us and see what conclusions we can draw. So this first data set that I have is we're looking at what happened specifically in June, or really the beginning of 2024, and we're looking at all of Sarasota and Manatee counties, all price points, all residential property types. So we're looking at single family homes, condos, priced from $100,000 to $20 million, basically. We're looking at everything. So if you look here at the overall market, you'll see that the overall numbers going back to January in terms of inventory, pending and closed sales have really not moved a whole heck of a lot. If you look at the middle of the graph, you can see the back half of 2023, we had a huge run up in inventory. But if you look at the red line, you can see that we've had a fairly stable environment for pending sales, and our closed sales jump around a little bit based a lot on some seasonality. But overall, if you look at June versus May of 2024, we only gained 0.5% in volume of listings. If you compare June to May in terms of sales, we were down 20% almost in closed sales. And then the same if you do it on June 24 versus June 23, we were down 20% in closed sales. So June, not a great overall closing month, although we didn't gain a ton of inventory, and we put the same amount of properties under a contract. So inventory seems to be somewhat leveling off, velocity of sales slowing down, which if you look at last May and June, that is a normal slowdown. Usually May is going to be one of our bigger months and things are going to slow down going into June as we start to get towards the summer. Perhaps more interestingly, if you look at this slide, which references our average price per square foot sold, which is kind of a good indicator across the board of what pricing is doing, you can see that between May and June, we had about a 1.5% decline in average price per square foot. But really interestingly, if you look at the same month last year or the same quarter last year, our price per square foot is up about 1 to 3% depending on which data set you look at. To me, as sales are starting to slow and ease, what we're not seeing yet is this massive pricing pullback. We're seeing prices remain steady and actually on an average stay a bit above where the price per square foot and average sale prices were in 2023, which is very interesting. This next slide shows you average days on market and average list price to sale price. And you can see that the average days on market has climbed quite a bit and continues to rise. We're actually sitting at an average of about 90 days for your average listing. So if most listing contracts are, say, 6 months, we're kind of averaging right in that range, 90 days to get it sold. Some of them sell quickly, some take the whole time, but this is up dramatically from last year where we were about 50 days on market. So things have changed a lot, and also our average list price to sell price. Across all data sets, you can take 10% off your list price. The average sale price across the board is about 90%, and that is a big difference because we are running at 100 to 103% for 21 and 22. So this is a big change when you're pricing and something you have to kind of factor in. All right, so this next slide is going to show us the average price of properties for sale on the market, which is the green line, and then the average price that is actually sold, which I'm much more interested in. That's the red line across the bottom. As you will see, the average sold price between May and June of this year actually went up about 3%. And if you compare it to June a year ago, you'll also see it's up about 5%. And it's the same for the quarter over quarter 2023 to 2024, a 5% increase in the average sold price. You're seeing the availability of higher price listings come off the market, which is lowering the average for sale price that you see, but the closed prices are continuing to remain strong even in the face of a lot of shifts and changes in our market. And that leads to the overall 2-county area. What is the inventory level based on closed sales? And for June, it was 5.5 months, which is still below what we say is a balanced market of 6 months of supply. Now, as you get into different micro markets, maybe your neighborhood, maybe your condo building, maybe your waterfront community, those numbers are going to vary widely based on each market. But again, overall, we're not looking at a market that's in unhealth at all. We're just looking at a much more balanced, kind of even keel market situation. So with that, let's drill a little bit deeper and get into the next set of numbers. All right, so the next data set we're gonna look at is we're gonna focus on the same market area, but we're gonna focus on the more luxurious end of the market. So we're gonna define that by homes and condominiums that are priced at $2 million and up. So let's dive in. We have 3 graphs to focus on for this data set. So if you're looking in the luxury price point over $2 million, you'll see from this graph that we accumulated kind of peak inventory in February and March of 24, which is what you would expect. You see the traditional seasonal absorption, and you actually see that inventory coming down. That can also be explained by people that may say, hey, now's the summer, now may not be the time that I want to put my luxury property or my seasonal beach condo on the market. There is some of that baked into these numbers as well. Overall, in terms of the amount of sold properties, quarter over quarter, second quarter 23 versus second quarter 2024, we're seeing no change. So we are seeing kind of constant absorption, and throughout all the headlines, it really has been our luxury market that has continued to be a very bright spot in the sales process here. If we look at average days on the market, you're gonna run a higher days on the market with a higher priced property for June of 2024. Add another month to that 90 days that we discussed earlier. So you're looking at 120 days on average, 4 months of marketing time to get to a contract. And the list price to sale price ratio is remaining consistent, running between 87 and 90% of the list price to the final sold price. A little bit different in terms of the amount of inventory though. You're gonna see that based on closed sales, we've got between 10 and 11 months of inventory, which is most certainly going to give more choices to a buyer and is going to favor a buyer more likely in negotiations on most properties, which is why you're seeing that list price come down almost 10% on average. Now, obviously, I was involved in a multiple offer situation just last month where my client paid well over the list price for the right opportunity, and the market is still strong in those areas. But overall, you're seeing a fair discount from the list price to the closed price in the luxury market. So for my third and final data set of specific market areas, we're going to look at condominiums between $0 and $2 million list price. So these are condominiums that are not ultra luxury in Sarasota and Manatee County. And what we have seen a lot across the board in our personal practice is that due to recent legislation, insurance costs, buildings needing updating, etc., this has been a market segment that has been a little bit tougher to sell in. So let's see if our personal experience is mirrored in the numbers. If you look at the first graph, again, you can see the massive inventory increase. Look at September of 23 and look at where we are now. We're up about over 100% in inventory. So inventory doubled in a very short period of time, in almost 6 months. Quarter over quarter from a year ago are down about 13%. And if you look at June versus June a year ago, we're down 25% in sales. So you're seeing a pretty good run up in inventory. You're seeing less sales, but really interestingly, the average sale price for this segment is $450,000 right now. That average last year was $459,000. So it's a decrease of only about 2%. So again, we're seeing all this data that looks like, oh my gosh, prices really should not be holding up, but we're seeing that the average pricing, the average prices per square foot are holding pretty steady. Let's look at the average days on market. You're going to see a higher time on market here again, averaging 100 days in this segment. Most properties are going for about 88% of their initial list price. So a little bit more negotiation on the condo prices, it would seem. And then looking at this segment for inventory, we've got about 7 months of supply, which, is a 150% increase from a year ago. And month over month, actually, it's about a 35% increase. So from even May to June, maybe all those sales that transacted in January, February, March of 24 were closing in March, April, May. Now in June, we're starting to see that tapering off. And again, that's consistent. We had a hard time with some of our condominium projects. I don't think that it's a knock on this particular asset class. I just think that for a variety of reasons, people have been a little bit more cautious. They want to see these buildings get through all their structural integrity studies, reserve studies, etc., to comply with new laws in Florida and kind of see where everything shakes out. So that's my hypothesis there. So let's pivot and talk about something completely different. So the topic of the day that we're going to pivot to is the presidential election. And I have now been in this business for 20 years, so I'm going to my 5th election cycle, and it is always some different version of crazy. And again, I'm filming this a couple days after Joe Biden dropped out of the race on the Democratic side. I wonder, when you're watching this video, what may have transpired since then. So it's just a little bit tumultuous out there, and I want to read you this quote. It says, presidential election years affect the national housing market and mortgage rates through 3 interrelated channels: uncertainty, policy expectations, and consumer confidence. This is because consumers may choose to postpone major purchases or sales until they gain greater confidence in the country's direction. And so that is really interesting. And this is an objection that we tend to meet in every election cycle. And my hypothesis is that although the ways that people may feel about what's going on in politics are valid, that the markets have historically shown that those feelings really don't add up to much. So take a look at this slide right here. So you can see that every year, 9 out of the last 11 presidential elections, that U.S. annual existing home sales went up. And in a lot of these examples, they went up fairly substantially. So maybe people were waiting to make decisions after the election. Things loosened up and they started to make a buying decision, kind of knowing what the certainty of who was going to be in power for the next 4 years in the country looked like. Also, look at this slide. Existing home prices went up after the last election, 7 out of 8 actually. And the one where they didn't go up was in 2008, which was a huge global recession. So we see that home sales in volume tend to go up after elections, and home prices in general tend to go up after elections. So if you're sitting on the fence and you're waiting for this election to happen, there's a very small chance that what transpires is going to directly affect the value of the property that you're going to purchase. So food for thought, because you may have less competition in the market now. That leads into this quote by Bankrate. Bankrate has said that for most Americans, the election results will have little direct effect on their income, and therefore should not significantly impact their decision to buy or sell. Music to my ears, but people that are uncertain, I understand your objections. This slide is actually from a financial advisor, and this doesn't reference the real estate market, but it references the stock market. And I think this is brilliant. If you look at the historical returns, it shows the elections along the bottom and the presidency, and it shows you what the stock market has done. And it typically just goes up over time. And you've got your blips and your pullbacks, but overall, equities, real estate, they recover well after elections or they just strengthen. So food for thought. The other big topic that has been talked about so much ad nauseum is interest rates. If you go back and look at the Russell recap from maybe 2 quarters ago, I think I predicted that we would see rates hit the high 5s by the end of 2024. And that's what a lot of experts that I follow were saying. And everybody has walked back those predictions. Now we are all hoping that we get a rate cut in September, which seems fairly likely. But this slide shows the projections for Q4, Q3 of 2024 as 6.83% and 6.6%. So that's a big difference from the high 5s. However, I do feel that if the Fed starts to show a signal that they're changing their monetary policy, that they're going to begin to cut rates, that's going to help the affordability gap that is propping up some of this pricing or putting pressure on it. So that will be good to see. And this next slide shows where they think rates are going as of now. It'll be interesting to watch these videos back and see, but still in the mid to low 6s in the second quarter of 2025, almost a year from now. So what that's telling me is from a rates perspective, we shouldn't expect a whole lot to change. Maybe things will start to ease, maybe there'll be more certainty after the election, but these would be my takeaways on all this information. Number one, fundamentally, we can see that the market is still fairly strong, but we start to see some pain points, some weaknesses. We see more inventory, we see more time on market, we see a good difference in what people are asking and what they're ultimately selling for. But we're also seeing signs of strength in different high-end sales. So, as a seller, you need to be pricing, I think, ahead of the curve, and you need to be very aware of your competition. As a buyer, don't get caught on the sidelines. If all of a sudden we get past the election, if rates kind of stabilize, people all start to feel more comfortable. We've seen that there is a historical bump, I demonstrated that, in price appreciation and in the amount of sales after these election events. So something to keep in the back of your mind as you evaluate your level of interest in participating in this market. I hope that this was informative for you. It's a labor of love for me. It helps me get more acquainted with what's going on in my own area of practice. And if you'd love to talk to me more about real estate and about your next move in the Sarasota Bradenton market, please reach out. Thank you so much for watching. And again, please like and subscribe to our channel to help us get out more good real estate content.